You've seen the title of the video, and no, I'm not being facetious, I'm not joking, I genuinely do love this movie. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, directed by Mark Webb, is a film that was initially divisive upon its release, but as the years have gone by, that divisiveness has transformed into this intense negativity and hatred towards this film. And I'm sorry, I just don't get it. I know this film is flawed, I know it's totally inconsistent, I know its story has problems, but I'm sorry, I love this movie. And to be honest, I'm just making this video to tell you why I love it and just to, spread the love. So, with all that being said, let's just jump straight into this. I can't deny that the story for this film is a bit of a mess. It just has to juggle so many storylines and plot threads. The mystery behind Peter's parents, Peter's relationship with Gwen, the birth of Electro, the introduction of Harry Osborn, Oscorp plotting to throw Harry out of the company, Harry's goblin disease, the death of Gwen Stacy, and just so much more. There is just a lot of things happening in this movie, and the end result leaves us with a film that feels just a little bit rushed. By far the weakest part when it comes to this film's story is just the amount of plot contrivances and devices to get characters to places that the plot demands. I mean, this is particularly the case when we get to the Harry Osborn subplots. And on top of all this, the film tries to create a larger Spider-Man cinematic universe by cramming in as many Easter eggs and references as they can to the larger Spider-Man mythology. But with that being said, I have to disagree with the criticism saying that this film is just one big trailer for the next one, since all the Sinister Six setup was all done in like the last 10 minutes of the movie. But for the most part, I like around 65% of this film's story. In many ways, this film feels the most like a Spider-Man comic book brought to the big screen. In my eyes, the film's story has two main issues: tonal inconsistency and massive plot contrivances. Everything done with Max Dillon's character in the first half of the film is just way too over the top. And it's kind of annoying because on paper, I can see what the writers were going for. They wanted Max Dillon to be a character no one ever paid any attention to, making him easy for the people above to take advantage of him, which we can clearly see when Oscorp steals his plans for the new power grid. But the way it's presented in the film, it makes him come across like the Riddler from Batman Forever. I think if it was played in a more subtle way, the character of Max Dillon would have been much better. To be honest, my biggest issue with Electro being the main villain for this movie is that he's treated like he is this massive threat for Spider-Man. We see him develop from this crazy loser into this powerful supervillain, but by the time he gets to the third act, all Electro does is just shoot electricity. If that's all we were going to use him for, why didn't we just introduce Electro at the Times Square scene and slowly reveal to the audience how he became Electro? Especially since Harry finds this all out when he's looking into the Oscorp archives. It's this over-the-top tone that this film introduces that makes it not feel like a sequel to the first one. I mean, it is a sequel to the first one since it carries over a lot of the major plot threads from the first film. The mystery of Peter's parents gets resolved, we follow up on Peter's promise to Captain Stacy and the effects it has on his and Gwen's relationship, the idea that Norman Osborn is dying, Dr. Connors gets referenced a few times, etc. But with that being said, I can see the argument as to why many think that this film doesn't feel like a sequel to the first one. This movie is constantly shifting tones from the realistic tone that we established in the first Amazing Spider-Man, and then it suddenly switches into this crazy and wacky and over-the-top tone that is more prominent in scenes with Electro and the Rhino. Although with the Rhino, I think it works because, I mean, it's the Rhino. With that character, I'm not expecting Shakespeare levels of writing. It's the Rhino. He's dumb, he's big, he's goofy. And I just find those scenes with Paul Giamatti as the Rhino just incredibly entertaining. I mean, the opening car chase scene, oh my god, it's so insane, but I just love it.
Say hello to Alexei Shevchevich!
The Harry Osborn blood disease plot was a very strange way to take the character of Harry Osborn, especially since we turn him into the Green Goblin in this movie. I mean, what is it with the movies keep trying to make Harry Osborn the Green Goblin? It happened like a couple of times in the comics, that's it. But the main issues with the Harry Osborn subplot simply stem from the fact that the film never establishes the rules as to how the Goblin disease works. Why does Harry Osborn act like he's going to die tomorrow when it took Norman Osborn 40 plus years to die? Why does Peter think Harry wants his blood for a transfusion? I get that Peter doesn't want to give Harry the blood because it could turn him into something worse, but then why doesn't Harry just tell Spider-Man, hey, I'm not going to use your blood for a transfusion, I want to genetically engineer it into a cure? In all honesty, this subplot really just does bug me, because all of the issues can be fixed with a simple rewrite. Just have Norman Osborn tell Harry that his condition is accelerating much faster than his, because of, genetics. Have Peter give Harry the blood, then have Harry develop a cure only for him to transform into the Green Goblin. There. Done. I fixed it. There are also a few superfluous subplots like Aunt May taking nursing classes and the planes that are about to crash into each other in the third act that just really didn't need to be there. It just wastes time and should have been replaced with some of the more important deleted scenes. Now, like I said earlier, I like roughly 65% of this film's story. The story threads that work for me are mostly all to do with Peter. I like how we resolve the parent storyline. It's basically what they did in the Ultimate Comics, but instead of it being with the Venom symbiote, it's replaced with Osborn and the spiders. Although I will say I don't like the prologue we get at the start of the film. Not only is it a bit nonsensical and the camera work isn't the best in that scene, but it also ruins the surprise, if you can call it that Richard and Mary Parker weren't corrupt and bad people. I mean, when I just watch this movie, I just tend to skip all that and just jump straight into the scene with Spidey skydiving into New York City. I also think that the Roosevelt train station's secret layer is a bit over the top, because I did some research, and the train actually is there, it's a real thing. But the fact that it pops out of the ground is just a bit weird. Like, seriously, Richard Parker just built this thing in his spare time? Yet, I do like the scene where Peter finds out in general, as I like the cross-cutting between Peter reacting to his father's message. God, Andrew Garfield is so great in this scene. And seeing Harry break into the Ravencroft Institute in order to free Electro. I like how it brings to the forefront the theme of the sins of the father. It shows us how Norman Osborn and Richard Parker's mistakes have resulted in Peter and Harry turning against each other, which I think is a pretty cool dynamic that the film creates. Now, I love Peter's constant struggle with his relationship with Gwen. His constant doubt on whether he should be with Gwen because of the promise he made to Captain Stacy ends up fixing the problem I had with the ending of the first film, since that ending in the first film makes him look like a bit of a dickhead. Because, I mean, you know, he broke a promise he made to a dying man. Now that I'm on it, and I know people make fun of this, but I really do like Captain Stacy's ghost haunting Peter. It visually represents Peter's guilt that Stanley and many other Spider-Man writers have used to illustrate Peter's constant internal conflict. Some may find it goofy, but for me, it doesn't feel that way. I quite like it, since it comes from the source material. The film also has these little moments where we see Peter alone, confused, and thinking about what he should do with himself because Gwen is moving to England. These scenes make the film feel like a Spider-Man comic, especially since all the great Spider-Man runs are full of scenes like these. If these moments were in a comic book, they would be filled with Peter's thought bubbles, and I think the film does a great job at conveying Peter's thoughts without him having to talk out loud or narrate over the scene. I love these moments. The segment in the film where Peter reconnects with Harry Osborn is done really well, especially considering the fact that Harry Osborn wasn't even mentioned in the first film, and I liked how the film treats them like they're old friends, because the way Garfield and Dane DeHaan play it, they feel like they're old friends. And of course, by far the best scene in this movie is the death of Gwen Stacy. Everything about that scene, that moment, was just perfect. The score, the cinematography, the action sequence between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin was really well done, and obviously, by far the best thing in that moment is Andrew Garfield's performance. Oh boy, Andrew Garfield's performance in that scene is just phenomenal. The way he plays Peter's denial that Gwen is dead is just so well done, and the way his voice cracks as he breaks down here, it never fails to bring me to tears every time. It's just honestly so perfect. I also don't understand the complaint regarding Peter's webbing forming the shape of a hand. Yes, it's an obvious metaphor, but that doesn't make it bad. I find that complaint to just be very strange. So we can complain about this, but Captain America literally breaking Iron Man's heart in Captain America Civil War is okay? The Sinister Six setup is cool, I guess. I mean, it's nothing groundbreaking, and it is a little convenient that the Sinister Six weaponry is underneath Oscorp, but I don't know. I kind of would have liked to have seen this film's universe interpretation of the Sinister Six. And oh yeah, does anyone else remember the man in the shadows? He's apparently meant to be the Gentleman, Gustav Fierce, who isn't even a character from the comics that I'm aware of. He's from these Spider-Man novels that I'm pretty sure nobody on this planet has even read. Just what a strange character to pull from. I mean, he was so irrelevant that I completely forgot to mention him in my first Amazing Spider-Man review because of how much of a nothing character he is. Anyways, I adore the way this film ends. The scene where Peter just sits down in his bedroom and listens to Gwen's speech, which motivates him into becoming Spider-Man again, is just... it's just such a powerful moment. The part where Peter opens up the cupboard and looks down at the Spider-Man mask as Gwen says,
"And if we were meant to be,"
is just perfect. The whole scene feels just so authentically Spider-Man. It's like what Into the Spider-Verse said.
So no matter how many hits I take, I always find a way to come back.
And I love the moment where the Rhino was ready to shoot down the kid dressed as Spider-Man, only for the real Spider-Man to finally show up again and save the day. It's honestly just such an upbeat, optimistic, and hopeful ending to the film, and I just can't help but love it. In many ways, it might even be my favourite ending to a comic book movie. That tied with Man of Steel and a couple of others. But with all that being said, this film, similar to the first one, was filled with studio interference, and I obviously can't move away from the story without talking about... Now, I thought that the first Amazing Spider-Man had a lot of deleted scenes, but the second one has even more, and that's just insane. For a movie that's already 2 hours and 20 minutes, there was meant to be so much more things that were meant to be in this movie. Shailene Woodley was originally going to appear as Mary Jane, although you can actually see her in the final cut of the film. She's actually in this shot right there. Flash Thompson was at the graduation scene. There was a scene with Peter and Harry where we find out Oscorp had Peter under surveillance. There's some stuff between Max Dillon and his emotionally detached mother which informed us on how Max turned out the way he did. There was scenes of the Green Goblin destroying Oscorp and killing Donald Mencken. There was meant to be a brutal fight between Peter and Harry after Gwen's death, which was cut in order to keep the rating down to a 12A. And, most importantly, there was an alternate ending where we see Peter's father show up at Gwen's grave, alive and well. What? What the hell? When writing this movie, who thought that that was a good idea? Thank God Mark Webb decided to cut that scene because he thought it was a BS idea. And I agree, it makes no sense. Now, I guess in an alternate universe where they did make an Amazing Spider-Man 3, you could argue that Richard Parker was either a clone or the chameleon in disguise, but the fact that this film was just going to have him show up alive and well with no explanation was just stupid. However, as stupid as that idea was, the scene itself is actually quite good. Andrew Garfield just really tears it up in that scene, and we also get Richard Parker telling Peter the infamous line of, "With great power, there must also come great responsibility." But in all honesty, I'm glad that scene was cut, because I much prefer the ending we got in the final cut, as the box scene between Peter and Aunt May regarding Ben's death was just so much more poetic and impactful. Also, Norman Osborn's head was supposed to be in a jar in the Sinister Six room, so yeah, that would have been a thing.
I'll love you long after you're gone, gone.
Once again, Andrew Garfield just nails it as Peter Parker and Spider-Man for me. In fact, I think he's much better in this film than he was in the first one, and I loved him in the first one. In this film, he feels exactly like college-age Peter Parker does in the Stan Lee run. I mean, look, they even have the same haircut. He has a much better balance of being cool and awkward, which essentially is what Peter Parker's like when he's in college. I also find that Garfield was much funnier in this one than he was in the first one. As problematic as the script is for this film really does just give him some really good quips and physical comedy to perform. And when it comes to those more dramatic moments, oh my god, is Andrew Garfield's performance just so powerful in these scenes. I mean, you can really just tell that he's giving it his all in this movie. As I said before, I like Peter's arc in this film. I like that he's filled with guilt after breaking the promise he made to Captain Stacy, which in turn affects his relationship with Gwen since she decides to break up with him because he's been yo-yoing her around for a couple of months. And I honestly feel like the film does a really good job at putting us inside Peter's headspace. I get where he's coming from. There are moments in this film where we see Peter alone, and we see that mentally he's being pulled in so many different directions. The mystery of his parents' disappearance is still on his mind. Gwen has decided to move to England, leaving him behind. Harry Osborn is dying and now hates him because he refuses to give him the blood. And at the end of the day, he just wants to be Spider-Man. And he also wants to be with Gwen. But he also wants to keep her safe and keep her out of harm's way. But by the end of the film, he fails. Gwen dies, the thing that Peter had been trying to prevent throughout the whole film happens, and it breaks him. He quits being Spider-Man for 5 months and is in a state of depression. Peter's arc in this film just really connected with me. Mark Webb did such a great job at showing us the impact of Gwen's death had on Peter in just under 10 minutes. I love the sequence showing us Peter standing at Gwen's grave as the seasons go by. The fact that it's edited to make it look like that Peter's just been standing there for months is just so great, as it visually represents how stagnant he has become. Without Gwen, he has no direction in life. And it's honestly a beautiful sequence. The film's representation of Spider-Man is great. Whenever he just arrives on screen, you can't help but feel excited and hopeful. From Hans Zimmer's fantastic Spider-Man theme, to the vibrantly coloured and comic-accurate costume with the big white eyes, to the way he carries himself when he's confronted with an enemy or a person in need. In a lot of ways, this film really nails the friendly neighbourhood aspect of Spider-Man. He stops a kid from being bullied. He fixes the kid's wind turbine. He interacts with the people in a positive way. He tries to calm down Max Dillon before even attempting to fight him, and just so much more. Once again, Emma Stone just kills it as Gwen Stacy. Ooh, no pun intended. Everything I loved about her in the first film still applies to this one. She's smart, she's caring, she's strong, she's got a strong sense of right and wrong, and I just love it. She's great. And the chemistry she has with Andrew Garfield is just so insane. Those two just work off so well with each other. The ground rules scene between the two of them is so genuine and sweet, it just makes you want to root for them to make things work and be together. I appreciate that their relationship doesn't derail into ludicrous melodrama, it simply just feels like two people on different paths trying to make things work. I like that Gwen wants to be with Peter regardless of what Peter promised her father, and the only reason why she initially breaks up with him was because he keeps yo-yoing her around. But I like that by the end of the film, Peter realizes that he shouldn't let his guilt weigh down his love for Gwen, and that he fully commits to leaving with England for her. By the way, that Jack the Ripper joke is really funny. But she dies, and it's truly heartbreaking. The writers and director Mark Webb wanted to make you feel her death, and feel it I did. The film just nails her death just so spectacularly well. Dane DeHaan as Harry Osborn was very good in my opinion. He feels a lot like his comic book counterpart. The film manages to capture Harry Osborn's spoiled rich boy mentality as well as his troubled relationship with Norman Osborn, his father, really well. Especially considering the fact that they're only on screen together for one scene. I really like the little moment between Peter and Harry where Peter's about to walk out of the office room and then Harry just snaps at him. That just felt a lot like the Harry Osborn that I knew from the comic books and cartoons. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the Goblin disease subplot was just such a strange direction to take the character of the Green Goblin. I don't know why Harry Osborn thinks he's going to die tomorrow, and I don't know why he magically assumes that Peter Parker personally knows Spider-Man. I know it's a trope from the comic books that people think that Peter knows Spider-Man because you take pictures of him, but in the movie, Peter's explanation that he gives to Harry about how he gets his pictures of Spider-Man was really plausible. It just comes across as the writers forcing Harry Osborn into becoming the Green Goblin so we can kill Gwen Stacy at the end of the film because we have to have a goblin kill Gwen Stacy. Now, speaking of the Green Goblin, what the hell is this? This design is bad. It's like they wanted to make him the ultimate goblin, but they also wanted to keep the glider from the 616 goblin, so they meshed it all together, and it's not a good design at all. But in context of the film, it works. I mean, Dane DeHaan does look very creepy, and he just nails the goblin laugh. Yes, the design is bad, and yes, it doesn't look exactly like the comics, but in context of the film, I think it works. Jamie Foxx as Max Dillon / Electro is, well, he's not bad. His acting isn't bad, it's just the direction they took the character. The goofy loner loser is not how I envisioned Max Dillon. Max Dillon in the comics was simply just an electrical engineer who got struck by lightning. Again, like I said earlier, if they just made this version of Max Dillon this unassuming guy who got trampled on by life, it would have just worked much better. But instead, we get stuff like this.
It's my birthday. Now it's time for me to light my candles.
But I will say, as goofy as they do make Electro, at least Jamie Foxx has some fun with it.
I like it a lot, Max.
And when he's Electro, he's fine. In fact, Fox is quite intimidating. I really enjoy the monologue he has at Ravencroft when he's with Dr. Kafka. I don't know, just the way he delivers it and the way the scene is paced, I think is kind of cool. I just don't like how we keep building up Electro to be this big menacing force, and by the end of the film, all he does is just shoot electricity and is this big environmental force for Spider-Man to face, and that's kind of all we do with it. Also, it's a little strange how in the final fight he becomes unusually talkative. Sally Field as Aunt May is spectacular in this movie. Not only does she have some good banter and back and forth with Andrew Garfield, but the You're My Boy scene is just so emotionally powerful. Both Garfield and Sally Field just act the hell out of that scene. Felicity Jones as Felicia, maybe Hardy, was solid, but there wasn't much done with her character. And Colm Feore as Donald Mencken was also good. Now, Electro may be goofy in this film, but when it comes to goofy and the right kind of goofy, Paul Giamatti as the Rhino is just excellent. He's just having so much fun and you can tell, and because he's having so much fun, I'm having so much fun. It's genuinely just so much fun to watch him on screen. On the flip side, Dr. Kafka is the wrong kind of goofy. 1, I don't know why he has a German accent. 2, I don't know why he's a man because in the comics the character's a woman. And 3, why is he just overacting so much? Curse this movie's tonal inconsistency! Hey. This movie is gorgeous. And no, I'm not just talking about it from a visual effects standpoint, the movie is genuinely gorgeous. The way it's shot, it's lit, it's framed, it's just stunning. I mean, look at this silhouette shot. I think that this is probably the best looking comic book movie. It's not too dark, it's not too oversaturated, it's got the right kind of color palette. Everything pops when it needs to pop, everything just feels right. It's genuinely just gorgeous to look at. And speaking of the visual effects, they're simply incredible. There are so many little details, like the way Spider-Man's costume wrinkles and ripples as he swings through the air, to the electrical currents that pulse through Electro's body. It's just so cool. Spider-Man has just never looked this good on screen. The swinging sequences in this film are simply astonishing. The way in which Spider-Man maneuvers through the streets of New York is simply impressive. The way he crawls up the web to gain momentum and speed is a move ripped directly from the Ultimate Spider-Man video game, and the swinging physics are honestly insane. This movie makes Spider-Man look real. It still baffles me how this Spider-Man film, a film that was made in 2014, looks better than Spider-Man does currently in the MCU. Now, a while ago, I made a video ranking all the Spider-Man movie costumes, and I said I flip-flop between this suit and the regular red and black MCU Spider-Man suit, the practical version, and I kind of realize now that, no, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit is by far the superior suit, because it's the most consistent. Whether it's practical or visual effects, this suit just looks amazing. With the Spider-Man Homecoming suit, it's really annoying because a good 90% of the time they just plaster it in CGI, and by doing so, it just makes Spider-Man look so artificially skinny and fake. Spider-Man in those movies doesn't look tangible, he doesn't look real. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit just looks amazing. The suit is practically perfect. Whether it's practical, computer generated, it just looks great. The MCU suit, on the other hand, Hans Zimmer's score for this film is really fantastic. In a lot of ways, it really pulls and ties a lot of the scenes together, from the quick ticking he uses to add momentum, like in the opening sequence, to the motifs he makes for the characters, Electro's dubstep, Spider-Man's theme, which is just so heroic and epic, the Peter and Gwen love theme, the Green Goblin has a theme, heck, even the Sinister Six have a theme, and they're not even officially a thing by the end of the film. Now, I like Hans Zimmer's Spider-Man theme more than James Horner's Amazing Spider-Man theme. I like James Horner's Spider-Man theme, but every time I listen to Zimmer's theme and when it plays in the movie, it just lets the audience know, hey, don't worry, everything's gonna be fine, Spider-Man's here. Although I do remember back in the day in 2013, when there was a leaked Comic-Con trailer for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, there was a more Hans Zimmer-fied version of the James Horner theme, and I think that it kind of would have been cool if that was in this movie. But anyways, we got Hans Zimmer's theme, and I love it. Now, I don't know how I feel about Electro's Paranoia soundtrack. You know, the dubstep chanting that was playing during the Times Square sequence? Because it just feels a little bit hit and miss for me. At some points, it really works. But then at other points, it just doesn't. But yes, overall, Hans Zimmer's soundtrack for this film is great. Now, I've heard a lot of people complain about the use of the song Gone Gone Gone, as many have said that it was blatant product placement, but I quite like the song choice. The tempo displays the chaotic thoughts going on in Peter's head, the scene is cut well to the beat, and the lyrics cleverly foreshadow the events of the third act. Plus, it's a good song. I don't know, I like it. Overall, I love this movie. Yes, it's totally inconsistent. Yes, it has a problematic story, but I love it regardless of all of its flaws. Andrew Garfield is excellent, Emma Stone is excellent, Dane DeHaan is excellent, the emotional moments are very effective, Hans Zimmer's score really ties the film together, Spider-Man has never looked this good on screen, and the film in general is just gorgeous. In many ways, I find this Spider-Man film, along with Spider-Man 2, Into the Spider-Verse, and Spider-Man Homecoming, to just be the more rewatchable Spider-Man films. It's just a good film to sit down, watch, and enjoy. Now, I heard somewhere that films aren't simply motion pictures. They're emotion pictures. They're meant to make you feel. And that's what The Amazing Spider-Man 2 does for me. It makes me feel. And I think that's why I really enjoyed this movie. It just connects with me on some levels. The film simply puts me in a good mood. Whenever Spider-Man appears on screen, I can't help but feel excited. When he's out of the costume, I love the character of Peter Parker. I love his relationship with Gwen Stacy, and I love her as a character. I want the two of them to be together, and when she dies, you feel it. And you feel Peter's heartbreak. Yes, the movie is problematic, but when I hear people say that this is the worst Spider-Man film, I just have to disagree. I mean, Spider-Man 3 for me, although it's not as bad as people say it is still fundamentally bad in places, especially when it comes to its characters. I don't know what the hell was going on with Peter and Mary Jane in that movie. Both were just extremely unlikable. But I digress. Spider-Man 3 is a story for another time. But overall, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a film that I really do enjoy, despite all of its problems. In my eyes, the good in this film just far outweighs the bad. Yes, it's problematic, but I love this film regardless of all of its flaws. But yeah, that's what I think of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I love the movie. But what do you guys think? Leave me a comment down below. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Hit the notification bell down there. My social media links are also down in the description, so if you give them a look and a follow, that'd be very nice. I have a second channel where I make short films, so if you give them a look, that'd be pretty cool, and I hope you enjoyed them. And until we meet again, I'll see you guys next time.